Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast, and thanks for tuning in this week. I want to go back to kind of the beginning of my journey and talk about a question that comes up when I work with new clients or when I have someone reach out and think about working with me. And this question has to do with kind of the idea of rock bottom and how do I know when it's time to quit drinking or slow down or take a look at my drinking. And the reason that this feels like the beginning of the journey is because for me, this was a question that rolled around in my brain for a long time before I, asked myself if, it was really time to stop drinking. I kept saying, well, if I'm not at rock bottom, my drinking doesn't look as bad as a lot of other people's drinking. And I think I've told you this story before, but you might remember that even my own mother said, well, I don't understand why you would quit drinking. You didn't have a problem. And I really had to get to a place where I let go of society's idea or perhaps the antiquated sort of old way of thinking that until we hit a rock bottom, until we're so low, like serious consequences, that there's no reason to stop or we don't need to stop or why bother with taking a break or reducing the amount that we drink. And I find it really fascinating. So I get this a lot from clients that come to me or potential clients, and they want to know, like, do I really have to stop drinking forever? And it's fascinating because the only person that can answer that question is you. But by asking that question, it's a clear sign that you're starting to evaluate the role that alcohol is playing in your life. And that question alone can help us sort of separate the emotions and the responses that we get and how alcohol is showing up in our life in a different way than the traditional sort of rock bottom. I really feel like when I grew up as a child of the 60s, that I thought people only stopped drinking when they had a DUI or people had to go to rehab or they lost their job or they were, the stereotypical bum under the bridge with a bottle in a brown paper bag. Like these were the people that were depicted as hitting a rock bottom and therefore needing to remove alcohol from their life. But it's powerful to think of that definition from Webster's that, rock bottom is like the lowest place you can go. It's like, why do we have to get all the way completely lost before we have permission to change our relationship with alcohol? And the new way of thinking, here we are in 2023, the new way of thinking is that we don't have to wait until things get so bad. And we can kind of see this phrase rock bottom coming out of the many of the 12-step programs and more traditionally perhaps AA, is that there was sort of this school of thought that people, if they didn't hit rock bottom, weren't taking their recovery or their sobriety seriously enough. And I think it's so powerful that now with new thought leaders and new ways of discovering, how the brain works and the impacts that alcohol really has on all areas of our life, that we really have permission to say, gosh, can I ask a different question? Not, is my drinking bad enough for me to stop? but is drinking good enough? Is it adding enough good to my life to keep going? And that was the place where I arrived in 2015 when I said, alcohol just isn't serving me anymore. And I was afraid if I kept drinking that I would get into serious trouble, that a reckoning was coming. And if I think about, wow, what if I had waited to hit a rock bottom? Like, what would that look like? And the reality is that rock bottom, we don't know when we're going through it if that's the lowest we're ever going to go. Is it when you throw up at a party? Is it when you stumble home at 6 in the morning and can't remember the night before? For some people, this wasn't my experience, but for some people, is it when you wake up next to a stranger in your bed and you can't remember what happened? Like, what is rock bottom? And so the reality is that alcohol can take us to some pretty dark places, but we don't have to wait for it to get worse before we start to question what else is possible. There's also this really interesting phrase called high bottom. Don't know if you've ever heard that one, but again, I think it comes maybe out of the 12-step language and lexicon. And it really is about like, well, you're at this high bottom where things didn't get super bad. And so you're at sort of at the edge where you were teetering on the edge of, if I keep going, things could get really bad. And that certainly was where I sort of made the decision to take a break. And for me, it wasn't even just a break, it was to really step back from alcohol in my life and to stop drinking and just say, I used to drink. I'm somebody who used to drink alcohol. I no longer drink alcohol. And people would ask me why. And the very simple but profound answer was, and still is, it was no longer serving me. And so I shudder to think what would have happened if I had waited to get to that rock bottom. And so if you're somebody who has questioned your drinking and wondered, like, how bad is it really? We do this thing where we look around often at other people in our life and we think, well, gosh, my drinking's certainly not as bad as his. Or, gosh, I haven't had a DUI like her. Or it's not like I day drink like that person. And so we can find that sort of looking for a rock bottom has us looking in places where if we're not yet as bad as the worst person we can think of, we can almost justify our continued drinking. Because let's face it, most of us, along with some, some cultural thoughts around rock bottom or high bottom or, is my drinking bad enough? We also have a lot of antiquated ideas about what it's going to look like to stop drinking. So if we tell ourselves that we're not as bad as so and so, we can sometimes play the game a little bit longer and continue drinking and think, well, I certainly don't have to quit. It's not like I'm drinking during the day, or it's not like I've lost my job due to drinking, or it's not like, in my case, my mother even thinks it's a problem. And so if we think about this idea of rock bottom, it's kind of ludicrous because we don't really apply this to other areas of our life, right? We don't say, well, if my car gets to rock bottom, like if it's so bad, then I'll take it to the shop and get it repaired. We would never do that. Instead, we look at, oh, there's an issue. We've got to get it fixed before it gets worse, or something's not running just right. I better have that checked out so there's not problems down the road, literally, and we end up stranded. So we wouldn't wait to service our car until we hit a rock bottom. And so it's kind of silly that we think that it's going to work with the amount of alcohol that we're drinking. And I think terms like rock bottom and high functioning alcoholic or functioning alcoholic, can really do us a disservice when it comes to empowering us to ask the important questions. And I think I've spoken about this before, but if you are in my world at all, you've heard me talk about asking better questions. And what I mean by that is that we know our brain is like Google. And so if we ask a question such as, well, how bad is my drinking? We're going to come up with a lot of, answers about how bad is your drinking, or is my drinking really that bad? We're going to come up with a different set of answers around, no, it's not so bad. We can come up with all kinds of other people who have it worse, that things are going really bad for them. And so we get to ask a better question. And from these better questions, we get to feel more freedom around our conscious choice, what I like to think of as an empowering choice. So I like to say, instead of saying, is my drinking bad enough for me to quit? We get to ask, what would it look like to drink less? Would I feel better? Would I show up differently? Would I feel more in control? Would I have less anxiety? Like, these are beautiful questions to ask ourselves. And so often asking a better question is a real a moment where we can use the power of our brain and our mind to unpack this very tangled weave that alcohol, this very tangled web that alcohol weaves. Because again, alcohol is not just a habit. It's not just a behavior. It's not just a moral failing. I actually had somebody, kind of question like, wow, it must have been really bad for you to stop drinking. Like, you must have really, gone, had some real problems. And, what a beautiful thing to be able to say, actually, no, I stopped drinking because alcohol was becoming a problem for me. It was no longer serving me. Like, my alcohol use was not impacting society or other people or my health in significant ways, but I could see the writing on the wall. So alcohol is not just those things. It's all of those things. And so when we start to ask the question of, would my life be better if I drank less? Would my life be better if I didn't drink? Those are some very beautiful, empowering questions. And you'll see that the word my life is in there. So we're not comparing our rock bottom or our high bottom with other people. And, the human brain loves to compare. It loves to analyze, like, how am I measuring up with other people? And so if you find yourself in this comparison mode, it's normal. But the beautiful way to get out of it and the empowering way to get out of it is to bring it back to what you know about you and your journey. Everybody is going to have their own unique sense of what feels like too much drinking. And for some people, that can be, I stopped drinking and now I'm finding myself drinking once a month. That might be a real problem for some people. They don't want to be tethered. For some people, it can be, I was up to 2 bottles of wine a night, and they know that they don't want to have that level of alcohol and the impact in their life. For some people, I binge drink twice a month, and that's too much. So all of us get to decide what is our own empowered choice. And again, I think words like, as long as you're functioning, then it really doesn't matter how much you drink, as long as you're not having a negative impact on your life. And what does that even mean, right? If we stop and consider it, like, we know that alcohol creates anxiety. Is that a negative impact on your life? We know that alcohol can make us more irritable. Maybe we snapping at our family and friends and our colleagues. Is that having a negative impact on our life? We know that alcohol creates a dopamine rush that then is, brought back down to normal range. Our body goes back into balance by dumping a bunch of negative chemicals in our body that are going to bring down our mood. So is that low mood having a negative impact on our life? It's really powerful to just call a spade, as my mom would have said back in the day, or maybe it was even my grandma, is just to really, stop pretending that alcohol isn't having a negative impact and ask, when is it too much for me? Not compared to your neighbor, not compared to your brother in law, not compared to the person on the front page of the newspaper who got a DUI, but compared to the life you want to live. And so if you're one of those people who is, starting to question how much you're drinking, that's the most beautiful place to start. That is that curiosity that we can lean into, and we can start exploring what would it look like to drink less. And we can take the terms out of highly functioning or functional alcoholic. We can take out the high bottom, the rock bottom. We can take out the depths of despair, and we can simply make a choice that makes us feel good about where we're headed. I know for myself, when I was questioning how much I was drinking and I didn't yet see a future without alcohol, I never felt excited about what I was moving toward. In fact, I was a little bit frightened about what I was moving toward. Like, if I keep drinking, what's ahead? And so we get to take that choice back. And we do it by letting go of the need for a rock bottom and maybe even removing that from our language when it comes to this idea of alcohol use disorder and how much we're really drinking. And instead, we get to tap into this personal empowered choice of, is the amount of alcohol I'm drinking adding to my enjoyment of life? So if you're one of those people and you're thinking about getting on a call with a coach, and whether it's me or another coach, I want you to think about, what does it look like? How much do you want to be drinking and why? We often think, well, I just want to drink less because the amount I am drinking isn't working. But I want you to really think about, what does freedom look like for you? What does it look like to not have to live in fear of your drinking escalating or your tolerance building or maybe someday hitting a rock bottom? What does it look like to make a choice based on how you want to move forward? So I hope this was helpful today. I think it's really powerful to unpack some of these thoughts that are so common for all of us in the beginning of the journey. So again, I don't think we need to hit a rock bottom. In fact, I think we should take the idea of a rock bottom out of our vocabulary when it comes to this journey of living alcohol free. Tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening to another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. I am loving these solo episodes, and I hope you are too. So before I let you go today, I just wanted to share that I have 2 openings this month for one-on-one clients. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this doesn't happen very often. In fact, I have been pretty much booked solid for most of this year, but a couple of clients ended and I hadn't taken on anyone new because I was traveling. So I am back, and I would love to connect with you if you are interested in one-on-one coaching. If you're wondering what the heck is one-on-one coaching, so as the sober nutritionist, I am also a certified life coach. And so life coaching is a place where we together get to focus on, what is it that really lights you up and moves your life forward. We don't spend much time going into the past. I'm not a therapist. We spend a lot of time focusing on what you want to build and create. And we do this around letting go of alcohol, or it might look like what you want to look at moving on from alcohol. Perhaps alcohol is in the rear view mirror and you're looking for the next thing that's going to light you up and is going to create that life you don't want to escape from. Or perhaps you're feeling a little flat after giving up alcohol and you're wondering, is this all there is? So this is the exact work that I do, whether it's your relationship with alcohol or your relationship with yourself. If you're looking for support, I would love to connect with you. So I'm going to link everything in the show notes. You can come to my website, The Sober Nutritionist, and you can check out what I offer when it comes to a transformation package. If you are ready and this is the right time for you, I would love to connect and support you as we grow together. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in and listening to The Sober Edge. This is a place to have important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, 5 Healthy Reasons to Take a Break. And I would be grateful if you would take a moment to rate and review this podcast so together we can reach more people who are looking for their sober edge.